morning, everyone. Many thanks indeed for joining my webinar session today. My name is Mark Long. I'm a director at BVA BDRC, the Market Research and Insight business, and I'm grateful to the team at Mortgage Solutions for extending me the invitation to share some of our latest landlord opinion research with you today, hopefully to inform your views and your actions in terms of what's happening with your buy-to-let clients out there in the marketplace at the moment. In the next 15 minutes or so, I will share an insight-led overview of the impact on the UK's private rental sector of the Covid-19 pandemic. My session is based on robust opinion survey research, and essentially I'll be representing the views of your landlord clients right across the UK. Please do use the question option in the webinar window to send any questions you might have throughout the session, and I'll do my best to respond to these at the end of the presentation. Firstly, a quick introduction to me and my business. I'm a director in BVA BDRC's Financial and Business Division, and we are one of the UK's leading market research and insight agencies. I lead on the agency's work across the private rental and buy-to-let sectors. I developed and launched the Landlords Panel, our unique multi-client survey of private landlord sentiment, which has been running since 2006. Many of the UK's leading buy-to-let lenders subscribe to this research, as does the industry trade body UK Finance. I've been asked to share a short summary of some of the key learning points from this presentation up front, so here goes. Landlords' confidence has crashed as a result of the pandemic, but there are some early signs of recovery. Over a half have experienced rent problems or unanticipated void issues during the pandemic, but landlords are working really hard to help their tenants wherever they can. Almost 1 in 5 buy-to-let borrowers have told us they've applied for a mortgage holiday, and a similar proportion intend to do so in the future. And looking forward, Covid-related debts will cast a shadow over the next 12 to 24 months of the private rental sector, influencing both market activity and future policy decision from governments and local authorities. The first cases of Covid in the UK were reported on the 31st of January, and we all know what's happened in wider society since then. Let's now look at how the virus has impacted attitudes, behaviours, and the relationship between landlords and their tenants in the last 6 months or so. We've been measuring landlord confidence on a range of dimensions for over 10 years. Here, we look at optimism across a range of issues, from capital gains on the portfolio, through rental yields, to business outlook. And the shift in response between our Q4 2019 survey wave, so pre-Covid, and the very latest Q2 2020 Landlords Panel research data collected just last month. The Q1 research took place at the end of March, at about the time the formal lockdown was being implemented, and we can see that sentiment was very significantly impacted on each of these dimensions. I'm highlighting those with the arrows here on the slide. However, in the 3 months since then, confidence has returned across each key indicator, though short-term optimism about the UK's economy remains extremely subdued. You can see that in the middle of the slide here. Here we can trace landlords' confidence in their own business prospects as far back as late 2006. We can plot the impact of the 2008 credit crunch and the slow but continued recovery until 2015, when the government introduced a raft of measures which were financially disadvantageous to many landlords. Business confidence continued to trend downwards since that point, but was really accelerated by the pandemic, reaching an historic low point in Q1 this year. As you can see, though, there are more hopeful signs in the Q2 data collected in the last few weeks, a bounce back in landlords' confidence in their own lettings prospects. Our friends at the National Residential Landlords Association have undertaken some bespoke research with their members to assess the business and personal impact for landlords, and we wanted to share some of their most recent findings with you. Here we compare landlord sentiment between March and April this year. And even during this relatively short time frame, we can see that there's been some positive movements in attitudes, with a larger proportion of landlords feeling that the pandemic will have little impact on their business. However, in the most recent snapshot, halfway down this slide, we can see that 27% of respondents stated that they will suffer some form of financial hardship, while being able to retain at least some of their portfolio. And at the bottom of the slide, we can see that a small proportion of landlords predict that they will lose their business completely. If this business failure volume was carried through to the total landlord population, which we estimate to be about 2.5 million, this would mean somewhere between 50,000 and 125,000 landlords being forced out of the market. We can explore the main concerns of landlords at this time and what they see as the main threats to their business. In the Landlords Panel survey, we collect open-ended responses from landlords who felt that the pandemic had negatively impacted their business. And having codified around 700 open-ended responses, we saw the three top themes as missing rental income, increased and or longer void periods across their portfolio, and operational portfolio management issues of one kind or another. I've included here just a few illustrative comments from landlords, but I think the quote at the centre top here was quite representative. Tenants are sending messages that they can't pay rent for the next few months. As a landlord, I'm panicking. I don't know what to do. I want to be compassionate, but I have 5 HMOs and I pay the bills, mortgages and running costs for these properties. If my tenants stop paying rent, how am I supposed to keep up? Quite emotive stuff. This slide looks at the requests which have been made of landlords by their tenants during the lockdown and how these have been dealt with. One of the reassuring things we've seen in this survey data is that a really high proportion of those requests have been granted or acquiesced to by landlords. Not in all cases, and not where the request has been deemed to be unreasonable by the landlord, but we are seeing quite a lot of compromise and cooperation to make things work for both parties, including responses to rental payment holidays received by about 4 in 10 landlords, and for significant rental reductions of more than 20%, which have been received by around 3 in 10 landlords. Landlords have even been willing to consider quite dramatic actions, such as the early release of tenants from their tenancy agreement to assist with their financial well-being. And hopefully this helps to bust a few of the myths that have been flying around in the press over recent months about draconian behaviour by landlords in the PRS. Before I finish today, I wanted to say just a few words about the impact of the pandemic on the buy-to-let market. As a quick reminder, it's worth remembering that not all landlords borrow to fund their portfolio. Our latest data shows that 1 in 3 landlords are unencumbered and not using any form of buy-to-let borrowing. That's typically those with the smallest portfolios, but even landlords with some of the largest portfolios in the country don't tend to rely on buy-to-let as a funding source. However, the majority of landlords do use buy-to-let, either on all of their properties or on some of them. A typical borrower in Q2 has 5.4 buy-to-let loans with 2.5 providers. That's their kind of lender repertoire built up over time. And they have an outstanding debt of around £520,000. On March the 17th, the government introduced the option of a 3-month mortgage payment deferral, often referred to as a mortgage payment holiday. The day after, these guidelines were extended to buy-to-let landlords where they were suffering financial hardship through the non-payment of rent by tenants. In the NRLA's April member research, borrowers were asked if they had taken advantage of the payment holiday facility. At this stage, 1 in 7 reported that they had applied and been granted a payment holiday, and an additional 3% had applied and were waiting for a response from their lender or lenders. 1 in 5 borrowers were considering making an application at some point in the future, and 6 in 10 at this stage had no current plans to make a payment deferral application to their lender. For buy-to-let landlords who have applied for a repayment holiday, we asked them how that went for the landlords concerned. Most applicants had been reassured that there would be no credit file impact of their payment deferral application by the lender. And for almost half, the payment holiday was critical to their business continuity, so really important that they got approval to their application. 1 in 3 respondents noticed that there were some differences in the lender processes for their applications, having approached multiple lenders. And a similar proportion had passed their payment holiday onto their tenants in the form of deferred rents. A minority felt that the lender decision-making was slow with regards to their application. But for the vast majority, it was a low effort experience overall. So congratulations to the lenders concerned for that piece of customer feedback. Finally, we can look ahead to projected remortgage activity in the buy-to-let sector this year. Around 3 in 10 borrowers plan to remortgage this year, with portfolio and limited company landlords more likely than average to do so. And that's linked to the fact these guys tend to have much larger portfolios on average. This business projection is unchanged since the end of last year, so brokers can continue to expect brisk business from their buy-to-let clients in the second half of 2020. Now, more than ever, your buy-to-let clients will need your professional support to help them weather the effects of the COVID pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the formal presentation element of my webinar today. I'll now respond to any questions that you've submitted to me during the talk.